Hello and welcome to Y Factor. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. Today, let's talk about climate change. Oftentimes, it is called the crisis of our times. But did it start yesterday, 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago? No. It started in the 1950s when the Industrial Revolution began and our planet started getting warmer. And Earth has been getting warmer since then till today. And its severe impact is being seen across the world. And now, nature is responding.
In Tuvalu, we are living the realities of climate change, sea level rise, as you stand watching me today at COP26. We cannot wait for speeches when the sea is rising around us all the time. Climate mobility must come to the forefront. We must take bold, alternative action today to secure tomorrow. Faftailasi, Tuvalu Modetua.
So that was the minister from Tuvalu sending out a powerful message to the world that the Pacific Islands, the countries of the Pacific Islands are sinking due to climate change. But it's not just the Pacific Islands, it's the entire world that is grappling with climate change right now, and we're seeing the effects of it now in our daily lives. Now we know the problem, but how do we solve it? Well, I'm here at Delhi's Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and I am going to talk to youngsters today who are working in this area of environment, climate change, and everything related to it. Let's talk to them today and understand from them what they think about climate change, its severe effects, and what can we do about it. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Nandini Harihar. I work as a research analyst at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water.
सबसे पहले मेरे को ये समझाइए आप through your research कि we're seeing all of these things happening around us today. China is going through a drought. There are wildfires in California. There is extremely heavy rainfall and flooding in Pakistan. The world is seeing these changes now. ये सब कुछ एक साथ अभी क्यों दिखाई दे रहा है?
I mean, we've been emitting for almost 70 years, I would say. The first actual news item that came out was in 1912, जहाँ पे उन्होंने बोला था कि हम काफ़ी सारा कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड, which is the main greenhouse gas emission, वो हम काफ़ी सारा निकाल रहे हैं, and because of that temperature is increasing. 1912 में ये बात हुई थी. फिर 1972 में स्टॉकहोम कॉन्फ्रेंस हुआ था, जहाँ पे यूनाइटेड नेशंस एनवायरमेंटल प्रोग्राम लॉन्च हुआ था, और वहाँ पे भी उन्होंने बोला था कि क्लाइमेट चेंज इज़ अ प्रॉब्लम. 1991 में हमने रियो कन्वेंशन लॉन्च किया था, जहाँ पे दिस इज़ अ ग्लोबल एग्रीमेंट बेसिकली, जहाँ पे उन्होंने बोला था क्लाइमेट चेंज इज़ अ रियल प्रॉब्लम. व्हाट वी नीड इज़ द वर्ल्ड टू कम टुगेदर टू टेक एक्शन. And even then, we had like small island nations who came forward and said, our nations are sinking. We are not going to have any land or country to live on in 1991. So this conversation has been going on for a long time. We've been emitting for even longer since the Industrial Revolution. But because these emissions stay in the atmosphere for so long, their effects take a long time to see. And now we've hit that tipping point wherein we are seeing the impact of it. We're seeing disastrous impacts globally.
Absolutely. We are seeing the disaster that is happening around us. And like Nandini said, 1912 से ये concept or ये conversation इस problem को identify किया. But why did it take all of us so much time to really understand the kind of impact that it's going to have on us? Hi, what's your name?
आकांक्षा.
आकांक्षा, 1912 से अगर हम ये कॉन्वर्सेशन कर रहे हैं, हमने प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफाई की है, व्हाई डिड इट टेक अस सो लॉन्ग टू नाउ स्टार्ट एक्चुअली एक्टिंग अपॉन इट, और अभी भी वी आर नॉट फुल्ली एक्टिंग अपॉन इट?
राइट. सो अगर सिंपल टर्म्स में बोले तो देर आर टेक्नोलॉजीज विच यू नीड टू ट्रांजिशन टू क्लीनर फ्यूल्स. आपको पहले आइडेंटिफाई करना है कि व्हाट आर योर एरियाज जहाँ से आपके मैक्सिमम एमिशंस आ रहे हैं, जिनको कि आपको टैकल करना है, एंड देन सोल्यूशंस डेवलप करने हैं. सो दैट लर्निंग कर्व वाज like the factor because of which action लेने में हमें टाइम लगा. Now that we have identified solutions, अब हमें टाइम resources चाहिए उनको scale up करने का, उनको implement करने का. So there are a lot of things which you need for to have a holistic action, you need finance, you need acceptance from people, you need a consumer behavioral change to adopt these solutions. So all that is taking time, and we are taking baby steps towards it, and things are moving.
You touched upon a very interesting thing, which is that of acceptance. Acceptance is something which we are actually expecting from the world, but abhi bhi wo nahi aayi hai hamare andar. We still think that climate change is something that is happening in the Arctic, in Antarctica, where polar bears are getting affected, but it's not going to affect our daily lives. Why is this acceptance taking a lot of time within all of us?
My name is Priyank and मैं भी काउंसिल ऑन एनर्जी एनवायरनमेंट एंड वाटर में काम करता हूँ। मेरे हिसाब से देखिए, जब हम बात कर रहे हैं क्लाइमेट चेंज की इंडिया जैसी डेवलपिंग कंट्री पे इम्पैक्ट की, हमें समझना ज़रूरी है कि जो हमारा विकास का मॉडल है, डेवलपमेंट मॉडल सिंस 1912 एंड बिफोर इज़ बेस्ड ऑन द आइडिया ऑफ यूजिंग रिसोर्सेज फॉर मैन्स गुड, एंड इट इज़ अब पिछले कुछ सालों में हमें रियलाइज़ हुआ है कि हमें अपने रिसोर्सेज को एक जुडिशियस तरीके से यूज़ करना है, जहाँ पे हम एक सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी भी बिल्ड करें। इसमें चैलेंज ये है कि भरी दुनिया के सारे देशों को क्लाइमेट चेंज के इम्पैक्ट्स सामने देखने को मिल रहे हैं, पर हमें ये भी देखना ज़रूरी है कि जो दुनिया की कार्बन स्पेस है, कि हमारा एटमॉस्फेयर कितना सारा कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड ले सकता है, वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा विकसित देशों ने इस्तेमाल कर लिया है। तो अब जब इतने सारे देश नेट ज़ीरो टारगेट्स की बात कर रहे हैं और भारत 2070 में नेट ज़ीरो की बात कर रहा है, तो वो ये देखते हुए कर रहा है कि कैसे वो अपनी डेवलपमेंट नीड्स और एस्पिरेशंस को मीट कर सके, बट इन अ मोर एम्बिशियस मैनर देन अदर कंट्रीज। और ये चैलेंज है एक्सेप्टेंस का, बिकॉज जो बात हम विकसित और प्रगतिशील देशों के बीच में कर रहे हैं, वही बात हम कर सकते हैं एक पर्टिकुलर देश के अंदर अमीर और कम अमीर लोगों के बीच में, कि सबका लाइफस्टाइल अलग है, एक एक्सेप्टेंस नहीं आ रही। और हम एक बहुत खतरनाक चीज़ और देखने को मिल रही है, जो 2 साल पहले CW की रिसर्च ने सामने लाई, कि हम एक स्वॉपिंग ट्रेंड देख रहे हैं। हमारी वेस्टर्न और ईस्टर्न घाट्स के बीच में ये डिफरेंस आ रहा है कि जो ड्राउट प्रोन एरियाज थे, अब वहाँ फ्लड्स आ रही हैं और फ्लड प्रोन एरियाज में ड्राउट आ रही है। इसका मतलब है कि हमें आगे प्लान करते हुए इकोनॉमी और डेवलपमेंट को ऐसे डिज़ाइन करना है कि हम रेजिलियंस को इनकॉर्पोरेट करें, और वो रेजिलियंस हमारे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में आनी चाहिए, हमारे पावर जनरेशन में आनी चाहिए, द वे वी बिल्ड आर न्यू कंस्ट्रक्शन, द काइंड ऑफ मटेरियल्स वी यूज़। और उसी के साथ देखते देखते हमें ये ध्यान रखना है कि छोटे तबके के लोग ना पीछे छूटें, बिकॉज इस ट्रांजिशन में जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, इसमें सबसे ज़्यादा नुकसान ही उन लोगों का है जिनकी इकोनॉमी इन एग्रीकल्चरल या फिर नेचर बेस्ड सॉल्यूशंस पे आधारित है। और वो ध्यान रखते हुए एक्सेप्टेंस इज चैलेंजिंग, बट वहीं पे सरकार और सारी हमारी जैसी संस्थाओं का बहुत काम आता है कि हम कैसे उन साधनों और सॉल्यूशंस को लोगों तक पहुंचाएं और उन्हें मेन स्ट्रीम करें।
Absolutely, और youngsters का भी of course बहुत बड़ा रोल रहता है when it comes to actually making people aware about the effects of climate change. And that tussle between developed or developing countries in terms of climate change and carbon emissions has been going on. And how do you sort of ingrain in them कि अब हमें the time to act is now? बिकॉज एक फियर है, एक फीलिंग ऑफ फियर की वजह से शायद हम एक्ट कर लें कि ड्राउट है तो हमें प्रॉब्लम होगी, एंड देयरफॉर वी विल एक्ट अपॉन इट। बट इन टर्म्स ऑफ आवर डेली लाइव्स गेटिंग अफेक्टेड, व्हाट्स द काइंड ऑफ इम्पैक्ट दैट इट हैज़ ऑन आवर डेली लाइव्स इन टर्म्स ऑफ, से फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आवर एग्रीकल्चरल क्रॉप्स एंड देयरफॉर द काइंड ऑफ फूड वी ईट, और इवन द फूड इनसिक्योरिटी पार्ट ऑफ इट?
Hi, my name is Milan and I work as a communication specialist at the council. So like you just mentioned that, people might act out of fear, but I mean, I'm not sure if that is the right way to go forward, because if you're acting out of fear, then you might do it to a certain point, but is that sustainable? Not really, right? So unless the idea of sustainability is ingrained into your lives, in your daily lives, I mean, unless that is the only way forward, then I don't think we'll be able to save the planet, unless that becomes the way we live. So I'll give you an example of a project I've been working on recently called Places of Climate Resilience. So we went out to 5 different states in India, Maharashtra, Odisha, Kerala, Uttarakhand and Rajasthan, and we captured stories of some of the most climate vulnerable people in the country. But the unique aspect is that we're not looking at just the loss and damage that is being caused by climate change, but we are highlighting how they're responding to the crisis, how they are coping up, how they're building resilience at the ground level. So that there are some very good examples of how India is building resilience at the ground level. Again, to give you a couple of examples specifically about youngsters, we came across this youth group in Mumbai's Ambujwadi, which is in the northwestern suburbs of the city, where the youth group is working very closely with an NGO to sensitize their community about the climate crisis. They are also talking about, the importance of preserving mangroves, for instance, which acts as a nature-based solution against flooding, against the impact of cyclones, etc. A lot of mangroves were destroyed in that area in the past because of infrastructure activities or projects happening there. There was another example from Almora in Uttarakhand, where youngsters, again working very closely with the local NGO, they are involved in spring restoration.
Do you think, Milan, in fact, all of you in your research, have you also found out that acceptance is a bit more in the younger generation than perhaps in the older generation?
Certainly, because the younger generation, including us, are the ones who have to go forward with the planet in this situation as well. I'm not saying that it's not completely there among the older generation, but I think we are the ones who really need to act or nudge people to act, to make the difference, to make changes in our daily lives, because otherwise it will become, or we will end up being in a situation where the planet is not livable anymore. So yeah.
Absolutely, and we are perhaps inching towards that. It won't be wrong to say. But talking about nudging people, and making them aware and making them act upon this, do you guys think that it's difficult to convince people in terms of the climate change, because we don't see a lot of things? For example, we can't see the ozone layer. So how will you explain it to a person that the ozone layer is depleting and therefore it's going to affect us, it's going to be harmful for us? Or perhaps electricity, switching off, and something as simple as switching off our fans and lights at home. We can't see it. And if we can't see it, we cannot really understand how it's going to affect us. Do you guys also face that problem in convincing people?
If I give an example of the food systems these days, we know that millets have been something that India has consumed traditionally. Jab Green Revolution aaya tha, 50 saal pehle, we took a step towards eating more rice-based dishes. We took a step towards eating basically high-yielding varieties. It was all about productivity. It wasn't about what food we're eating. The narrative has now changed from eating more or high-calorie foods to eating well, nutritious food, right? And we have to bring back those stories. Those stories are embedded within our communities, in the districts that we're seeing, in all of the communities all across India and wider as well. So how can we bring those narratives back and really inform also our policies and technological decisions with those knowledge systems that are already existent?
Bringing back ancient Indian wisdom is perhaps one of the biggest solutions that we can have to tackle climate change. But, developed or developing countries ke beech mein ek tussle hamesha raha hai since we've started this conversation about climate change. And because we're all Indians, we live in a country which is still developing. We sort of look towards the developed countries to really cut down on their emissions and sort of work more towards climate change than this part of the world. Now, US and China, we know, are the biggest emitters so far, we know. For a country like India, how do we as Indians sort of perceive and act upon the fact that developed countries still have a culture of, say, wasting food or, not really taking from nature as much as ancient Indian wisdom does? How do we sort of move our way through that or pave our way through that?
Honestly, I think there's maybe a two-way of looking at this. One is, like Nandini just explained, on the Lifestyles for Environment movement. If this is something that India can project out and talk about how the idea is that we need sustainable consumption, we need sustainable production, but that shouldn't be curtailing our growth and our development. That is the main idea of it. And it requires, one, on the individual level, the nudges on just switching off your light, switching off your fan, things like that. But at the same time, you also require the entire, idea of how do you use and throw things, that kind of a culture needs to be rechanged, that needs to be rethought about. And this requires both from a production side for applications and for products to actually be made such that they're lasting. This is something that, as we've seen over the years, I would say that products don't last as long as they used to. Say that I have like my nani sari from like the 70s that is still lasting, whereas like I'll buy a t-shirt 4 years ago, it won't last anymore. So products are made in a manner that they are use and throw. That is something from a production level that needs to change.
So, sustainable consumption and production is something very interesting. In fact, the jeans that I'm wearing also apparently, in the manufacturing of it requires a lot of water, and a lot of water is wasted. So, basically I'm trying to get to the point that sustainability is something that we all need to follow. But also, you all must have noticed that the products that are labeled as organic, they are expensive. They're not sold at a very reasonable price. Why is that? Why is the cost of sustainability so high? And is it just prevalent in India, or do we see it in other countries as well across the world?
I think economies of scale is the answer here, because sustainability, like you rightly said, is a very expensive choice at the moment. Not everyone can afford it, right? That's also because the demand for such products are also less. So unless we scale up, unless things are produced at scale, that is where economies of scale would kick in. That is where, demand would increase, prices would go down. So pure economics at play there. So it's essential. I mean, at least the initial stages, there'll have to be a lot of interventions from the government. There'll have to be significant subsidies, etc., so that your sustainable mobility is affordable, your sustainable cooling is affordable, sustainable food systems, organic food, etc., is affordable. So that government intervention bit will be very significant, because we are a country which is growing, people having those aspirations to move to that next tier of social strata or economic strata. But then for that to happen in a sustainable manner right now, maybe, like I said, everyone can't afford.
Okay, so in terms of, action on ground, basically we have two things. One is the government policy making, how the government really tackles this and what it comes up with in terms of policies. And the second is individual action. And when I talk about individual action, I particularly want to talk about youngsters' role in it. Because youngsters are bearing the brunt of it. Everybody is, of course, but it is the present generation and our future generations जो climate change के effect को सबसे ज़्यादा महसूस करेंगे. How do these two come into play when it comes to tackling climate change on ground?
So, one answer to that is कि आप इस sector का खुद part बने. Youth, I mean, to them, besides education, they want to be employable, they want to be, have more sustainable, decent jobs. तो ये sector जो हम clean energy transition की बात करते हैं, जो कि climate change को mitigate करने में बहुत help करेगा, youth has a huge opportunity to be a part of this sector. And I think government ने बहुत ही positive steps लिए हैं skilling के around, employment opportunity creation के around. In fact, CW की एक study है जो कि ये employment opportunities track करती है, और उसमें हमने ये पाया गया है कि 3.4 million new jobs create हो सकती हैं अगर जो government है अपने solar और wind targets उन्होंने announce करे हैं उनको achieve करें तो आने वाले 8-10 सालों में 2030 तक 3.4 million new jobs create हो सकती हैं.
Before we talk about the further conversation about government's decisions and government's policies and of course individual action, take a look at the story of what really the government has done in terms of tackling climate change so far. Placing climate change at the center of its environmental policies, India has been making continuous efforts since the past several years towards balancing environment and development. The country took some pledges in 2021, with Prime Minister Modi asserting at the crucial International Climate Summit COP26 that it is the only country delivering in letter and spirit the commitments under the Paris Agreement. A number of initiatives, including the International Solar Alliance with more than 120 signatory countries, have been taken in India to combat climate change and find more eco-friendly alternatives. PM Modi listed out 5 commitments of India to combat climate change. India will achieve the target of net zero emissions by 2070, achieve 500 gigawatt non-fossil energy capacity by 2030, thereby fulfilling 50% of its energy requirements from renewable energy sources by 2030. India also launched One Sun, One World, One Grid with an aim to harness solar energy wherever the sun is shining. At the UN climate meet, India once again highlighted that developed nations have not fulfilled their commitment of meeting the annual $100 billion goal of support to developing nations since 2009. Apart from this, India's 14 tiger reserves have got the CATS accreditation, 47 sites have been declared as Ramsar protected sites, and 10 beaches have got Blue Flag certification. India entered the Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue with the US under India-US Climate Clean Energy Agenda 2030, aimed to provide both the countries an opportunity to renew collaborations on climate change. India also launched a campaign, Plastic Hackathon 2021, to ensure that the country becomes free of single-use plastic by 2022. ग्रीन जॉब्स और ग्रीन टेक्नोलॉजी की बात चल रही है एंड गवर्नमेंट डिसीजन मेकिंग की बात चल रही है. नाउ कमिंग टू इंडिविजुअल एक्शन, प्रियांक, let me get this straight. Let me ask you very directly, what are the changes that you have brought in your lifestyle to really contribute to tackling climate change?
दो तीन ऐसी बातें हैं. जब मैं छोटा था, बिल्डिंग में बाहर कूड़ा जलाते थे, पत्ते जलाते थे, तो मैं घर से 4th फ्लोर से बाल्टी भर भर के नीचे उसे बुझाता था कि इससे धुआं हो रहा है, ये सेफ नहीं है. पर अब जैसे मैं बड़ा हो गया, मुझे रियलाइज़ हो रहा है कि एक अकेला इंसान ये नहीं कर सकता. बट हाँ, CNG व्हीकल्स यूज़ करना इज़ वन थिंग जिसके थ्रू आप अपना, मैं कई सालों से मैं और मेरी फैमिली ने, कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव भी है और थोड़ा सा आपके एमिशंस भी कम है. उसके अलावा आप पानी कहाँ कितना यूज़ कर रहे हैं, क्या पेड़ लगा रहे हैं. मैं पर्टिकुलरली हमारे ऑफिस में 1000 पौधे हैं. हम जिस कारपेट पे चलते हैं वो एक रिसाइकल मटेरियल से बना है, रिन्यूएबल्स रन फैक्ट्री में. उसके अलावा हमने पिछले रिसाइकल मटेरियल किया है, AC के डक्ट और शिफ्ट्स को गमले बनाए हैं उसके. तो छोटे छोटे आधुनिक और क्रिएटिव तरीकों से हमने चीज़ें चेंज करी हैं.
सॉल्यूशंस की बात करें प्रियांक, तो वन ऑफ द मेजर फैक्टर्स टू फाइंडिंग सॉल्यूशंस फॉर क्लाइमेट चेंज इज द क्लाइमेट फाइनेंसिंग पार्ट ऑफ इट. फॉर दोज हु आर वाचिंग द शो, हेल्प अस अंडरस्टैंड फर्स्ट सिंपली कि क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस होता क्या है एंड हाउ कंट्रीज आर ट्राइंग टू अचीव दिस.
मैं संक्षिप्त में ये चीज़ बताना चाहूँगा. क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस इज फाइनेंस which is given and used for climate action. Climate action के दो बड़े आधार हैं, मिटिगेशन और अडेप्टेशन. मिटिगेशन इज जब आप अपना क्लाइमेट उत्सर्जन कम करें, यानी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड और ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशंस को कम करें, उसे कहेंगे मिटिगेशन. अडेप्टेशन इज कि होने वाले और चलते हुए क्लाइमेट इम्पैक्ट्स से कैसे अपनी रेजिलियंस बढ़ाएं, उनसे संभाल सकें. जैसे मैनग्रोव्स पेड़ उगा के सॉइल और वाटर की रेजिलियंस बढ़ाना ताकि वो ना आए. अब चैलेंज क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस का ये है कि डिमांड क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस की डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज से है, डेवलपिंग और वल्नरेबल कंट्रीज को. पर दुनिया में आज तक क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस की एक एक्सेप्टेड डेफिनेशन नहीं है, बिकॉज सबकी अलग अलग धाराएं हैं. और ऑफ कोर्स जिनको पैसे देने हैं, जो रिस्पॉन्सिबल हैं हमारे प्लैनेट और कार्बन स्पेस को यहाँ तक पहुँचाने के लिए, वो भी अपनी अपनी जेबें रोकना चाहते हैं. अब उस वैसे देखते हुए क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस का एक सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज ये भी आता है कि आप जो भी पैसा आपको मिलता है छोटे देशों के लिए या फिर जो वल्नरेबल कंट्रीज हैं, वो लोन्स के आधार पे मिलता है, जिसका मतलब है कि आपको वो पैसा लौटाना होगा विद इंटरेस्ट. जबकि क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस की सही और परिभाषा है ग्रांट्स, यानी वो पैसा जो दिया जा रहा है सपोर्ट के नाम पे, भले वो फाइनेंस हो गया, टेक्नोलॉजी सपोर्ट हो गया, ह्यूमन रिसोर्स हो गए, पर वो पैसा ग्रांट की तरफ से जा रहा है जो वापस नहीं देना पड़ेगा और उसको यूज किया जाएगा क्लाइमेट मिटिगेशन और अडेप्टेशन के लिए.
Okay, so that was about, climate finance, and India has, like Priyank talked about, taken several initiatives when it comes to tackling and battling climate change. One of them is International Solar Alliance, and there have been several other initiatives which the government has announced. But बात वहीं आ जाती है कि one solution is not applicable to every country. Demographics different hai, terrain different hai, population size different hai. In such a scenario, how does the world come to one, or say, a consensus to really move forward in beating climate change?
Well, the world, I think, already has a consensus, which is not a consensus, but we already have a target and a deadline, which is to limit temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius. And a better target also that the IPCC has put out is to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, this is our target that we know. We have countries that have put out their net zero targets. We have countries that have put out their climate pledges. And these currently, unfortunately, not for everyone, is in line with the temperature target that we have. So the first step I would say is to bring your current national targets in line with those temperature targets at a national level for everyone. Then after that, you start looking at what are the development opportunities within your country.
Coming to the last segment of my conversation with you guys, I want to talk about how you see the future ahead now, the near future, and what you would really like to say to youngsters who are watching the show on how they can contribute to, beating climate change and really contributing in their daily lives through small initiatives that they can take and small efforts that they can make to really do their bit in combating climate change.
Well, to begin with, I would say just assess your environment, right? What resources are you using right now? Do you need to buy this next shirt that you want to wear for a party tonight? Can you already pick out something from your wardrobe? Where are you purchasing from? Can you make it yourself instead of buying it if you have the time to do that? There are so many things in terms of water aspect. Priyank just spoke about मतलब कि कूड़ा जलने का और पानी गिरने का. Usually हम अपने घर में मोटर चलाते हैं, तो सुबह सुबह आप मोटर चला रहे हैं तो वहाँ से पानी तो नहीं गिर रहा है. Just being cognizant of little actions, but there are also bigger actions that we can do. Maybe bigger in our sense in terms of क्या हम चक्की से आटा खरीद रहे हैं या हम कहीं plastic packaged food खरीद रहे हैं. So how can we reduce waste in every step that we're taking? This might seem big for many of us because we're like, oh, that's not convenient. That I can't change to a toothbrush which is made of plastic to a toothbrush that's made of bamboo perhaps, because that's just a behavioral shift that's not okay for me. Start at 5 things in one day. Maybe start doing some incremental change in your life and say, okay, this week I've changed so many things in my life in terms of where I buy from, what I'm consuming on a daily basis. Do I need to eat processed packaged foods every day? Can I reduce that? And can I not waste as much?
So the message is clear that the problem is us, but the solution is also us. And that's why we need to act fast. We need to act now when it comes to climate change, because now nature is telling us to act fast. This is it in Y Factor this time, but next time we come up with another interesting conversation. But before I go, I'm leaving you with an inspiring story of Padma Shri Tulsi Gaura, who's also known as the Encyclopedia of the Forest. Take a look at her story. I'll take your leave. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye. 73-year-old Tulsi Gaura, an environmentalist from Karnataka, was conferred the prestigious Padma Shri Award for her contribution towards the protection of the environment. She hails from the Hallaki indigenous tribe in Karnataka and is widely known as the Encyclopedia of the Forest. Since she was 12 years old, Tulsi Gaura has nurtured and planted thousands of trees and later even joined hands with the State Forest Department. Even as a child, Tulsi Gaura, who never attended school, worked to reverse the stripping of local forests by replanting trees. She would walk for miles deep into tropical rainforests, carefully cutting healthy branches from hundreds of trees. During day-long trips to the forest to collect firewood for the family, her mother taught her how regeneration is best done with seeds from big healthy trees. When she was a teenager, she turned a gutted landscape behind her family house into a dense forest. India's tribal communities possess and follow ancient natural practices that worship, preserve and use elements of nature in everyday life, thereby balancing the human-nature relationship and paving the way for a healthier and greener ecological system.